Nau mai, haere mai, and welcome to 3MT 2020. My name is Megan McAuliffe and I'm the Dean of Postgraduate Research here at UC. I'm here with my two colleagues, Ekant Via, Associate Dean of Postgraduate Research, and George Stillwell, who is the UCSA Postgraduate Representative. I'm going to hand over to you, George, to say something from the UCSA.
So on the behalf of the UCSA, we'd just like to extend a warm welcome to everyone that's watching tonight. We're going to hear about some awesome research, and from my own experience, I know how hard it can be to explain your studies in 3 minutes, so we're going to have some really informative videos here tonight.
Yeah, so this is not the way we like to do things. I mean, usually 3MT is a highlight of our year where we get people together, we share some kai, we have a bit of a laugh. And unfortunately, there's this thing called COVID that's been going around. You might have heard of it, and as a result, we've had to record this and share it with you live tonight instead. But that doesn't mean that we can't still hear about some of the awesome research. As George has said, it's really difficult to condense your whole thesis down into 3 minutes, but we've heard from a number of people from the college heats, and we're looking forward to seeing what they've got to share. So well done to everyone who's participated so far. Looking forward to hearing how you go. Megan, on a lighter note, tell us about the prize money.
Thank you very much, Ekant. We have some great prizes for all of the students here tonight. So if you are the winner of 3MT, you will receive a $5,000 prize. If you come second, $2,000, and the third place getter will receive $1,000. So all is not lost. We're going to have a great evening tonight, see some wonderful videos, and the winners will receive some fabulous cash prizes as well. Yeah,
and usually with 3MT, we send the winner over to Queensland so they can present to the Australian finals. We won't be doing that this year. It's probably for the best, so lucky you, you don't get to go to Queensland this year, but you still get that prize money. All right, let's crack into it. And first up, we've got the College of Science, and the three top winners from the College of Science are Amanda, Morgan, and Flynn.
When people think about proteins, they tend to think about them in terms of their diet or nutrition. But proteins are so much more than that. They play an essential role in the cell and are crucial for the survival of the organism. They do things like carry out reactions, transport things around the cell, and provide structure. That's the role of oleosins, the protein that my thesis is based on. Oleosins are found in seeds and nuts, and they work to contain the fat. Let's use coconut, for example. The coconut itself is a seed, so inside it you'll find everything you need to grow a coconut tree. In the coconut flesh, there are two types of molecules, water-loving molecules and water-hating molecules. These are usually just fats. These two types of molecules, they can't mix. The coconut solves this problem by creating fat balls to hold in the fat. It's pictured at the end of the slide. The fat balls have this outer layer in orange and dark grey called a membrane. The membrane has an outer bit which is water-loving and an inside which is water-hating. This is how they hold in all that fat. The membrane is also where you find oleosins. The fact that oleosins have a water-loving side and a water-hating side makes them really difficult to deal with. But it also makes them unique. No other protein looks or acts the way oleosins do. For my thesis, I'm interested in the interactions oleosins can make with the water-loving stuff on the outside, with the water-hating stuff on the inside, and just the interactions they make with each other. My hypothesis is that oleosins interact with each other to further secure the ball of fat, but also that they interact with water-loving proteins on the outside to digest the fat and get ready for germination of the seed, or in our case, germination of the coconut. Understanding these interactions can lead us to making new things like natural emulsifiers for food or even cosmetics. I could even take it a step further. If I can understand how oleosins interact with each other, perhaps I could make an all-oleosin membrane. We could put things in it like water-hating medicines, like a lot of cancer treatments. Using oleosins, a protein, instead of natural membranes is more robust, but still easily digestible in the cell to release that treatment, but also provide essential amino acids for cell repair or cell growth. As protein biochemists, We work on tiny, tiny things, but these tiny things have huge implications in people's lives. Thank you.
Kia ora, I'm Morgan, and I'm a pollination ecologist. I'd like to introduce you all to a concept called neighborhood effects. That's when you have certain species in an ecosystem influencing the interactions between other species. In New Zealand, understanding how the neighborhood effects of large, showy invasive plants, like this hawkweed in the first photo, influence our small, inconspicuous natives, like the Carmichaelia in the second photo, is critical for us to target our conservation efforts. So, let's take a trip to the middle of the South Island to the Mackenzie Basin. As you can see in the background here, it looks like a really dry, desolate area, but it's actually home to some of New Zealand's most unique flora. Unfortunately, it's also been heavily exposed to tourism and irrigation, so the invasive species that have been introduced are really thriving. But it's also home to Carmichaelia, which is a small, nitrogen-fixing legume not found anywhere else in the world. It's also so important to this landscape because it's putting nitrogen back into the soil, which is a critical element for so many plant species. So, to start understanding how the neighborhood effects of these large, showy invasives are influencing Carmichaelia, I needed to know how they reproduced. To do this, I covered Carmichaelia with insect netting to exclude any potential pollinators, and I waited to see if seeds were produced. When no seeds developed, I knew that they were insect pollinated. Then I used observations to determine that their main pollinators were a suite of native insects, like this bee. But as you can see, this bee is also visiting hawkweed, so we know that there must be some neighborhood effect occurring. The first option is facilitation, and that's where you have these large, bright, showy invasive flowers attracting more pollinators to an area. Theoretically, that sounds really beneficial, but what actually happens is it results in incompatible pollen being brought back to Carmichaelia, which has a net negative impact. The second option is competition, and that's where these bright, showy invasive flowers outcompete our small natives for pollinators. And so there ends up being a pollinator drought, and then the Carmichaelia suffers. But hey, let's say that Carmichaelia is perfectly pollinated. There's still a third issue for these tiny plants. As you can see in the third photo, there's a larvae coming out of a Carmichaelia pod. And what actually happened there was seed predation. So these larvae go inside the pods and eat all of the developed seeds. Now, I'm hypothesizing that this larvae comes from a beetle that was originally introduced from Europe to control Scottish broom, another invasive species. But now it started targeting our natives. This is plausible because it's already been seen targeting other invasive species. Regardless, the results from this research are applicable well beyond the scope of conserving just this one plant. Understanding how the neighborhood effects of large, showy invasives are impacting our small, inconspicuous natives is critical for us to target our research and resources to protecting New Zealand's native biodiversity. Thank you.
"45% of New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions are methane. This is incredibly alarming because methane has a global warming potential that is 28 times that of CO2. Now, New Zealand, we're a pretty green country, there's no denying that. In fact, we're so green that even our bacteria are doing our dirty work for us. The aim of my thesis is to employ these bacteria to degrade methane and in the process create biodegradable plastics. Now, when I say bacteria, people often think of E. coli or food poisoning or washing your hands. Well, what if I told you there are other bacteria out there? Benign bacteria, tiny molecular machines that can essentially degrade methane. Folks, I'd like to introduce you all to the methanotroph. Methano meaning methane eating, troph of relating to nutrients, methanotroph. So these guys eat methane for food, which is pretty incredible, right? But in this process, they release CO2 and other chemicals that they cannot process. These are the blue bubbles on the slide. So when they release CO2, this is a problem. It's still a potent greenhouse gas. And this is where the next bacteria of my research enters the field. The purple light-using bacterium. Purple light-using bacterium are incredibly versatile with what they can eat. In fact, they can eat all the things that the methanotroph releases, including the CO2. But they have another trick up their sleeve. Just as us humans have fat stores, so do the purple light-using bacteria. But instead of fat, they store a special kind of nutrients. And we can use this nutrients to make biodegradable plastics. So, Coming full circle here on the slide, at the top, we have methane being released, a potent greenhouse gas. We filter this into a bioreactor, which is essentially a tank with bacteria and liquid. Our methanotroph friend lives here and eats the methane and releases those blue bubbles. Our purple light-using bacteria friend eats these and stores up that special kind of nutrient. We then harvest the purple light-using bacteria for that bioplastic. This is really exciting because this biodegradable plastic has been used to create water bottles, and it's been used in the medical industry to create sutures and staples, slings and surgical mesh. My research aims to better understand the interaction between these bacteria and figure out what the best conditions for growth are. Now, I'd like to leave you all with a quote from our climate activist friend Greta Thunberg, in which she said, "You're never too small to make a difference." How fitting a quote for our bacterial friends. Thank you all for listening.
Awesome. Those are going to be hard ones to beat. Now, to introduce my college, the College of Engineering, we have Samuel, Sierra, and Ahmed.
What a waste. I'm not talking about my PhD. I'm talking about this waste. In the steel industry, they only care about the iron, so all the remaining impurities are dumped outside of the factories. Only last year, 600 million tons of this material ended up in there, dumped at 1,500 degrees Celsius. That is way higher than the temperature at which lava comes out of a volcano. And we are wasting all of that heat. But that's not all. This is also a waste of a very valuable metal, one of the strongest, but also lightest, with many applications. We can find it in satellites, airplanes, and probably in some of your mouths. I'm talking about titanium, a metal as expensive as gold, and 1/3 of that is titanium. What a waste! My research sees this wastage as an opportunity to take advantage of the available heat to extract titanium from this molten material. To do so, I use electricity, producing metal without generating CO2 or the other greenhouse gas emissions common of the traditional practices. Sounds good, right? Some of you are probably thinking, can't believe this has not been studied before. So did I. But after 3 years working on this, I can confidently tell you why. Replicating these lava-like temperatures in the lab, it's very hard using traditional furnaces. At those temperatures, every material wants to react with each other, and even finding a suitable container is a mission. In my research, I have been able to overcome these challenges by using a special type of furnace. This furnace focuses light at a tiny point that heats up to very high temperatures. This has allowed me to study the feasibility of the process without having to worry about any material constraints. This way, I have been able to prove that it's absolutely possible to recycle this material. Today though, in New Zealand, this material is crushed and sold for road construction. So you may not be walking on sunshine every day, but you are certainly walking on titanium. The results of my research are changing the way we look at this wastage. So next time, if I ask you, what can you see in this picture? I hope the answer is clear. An opportunity.
Welcome to Dancing with the Stars. Our main couple are two beautiful, graceful dancers in a fast-paced foxtrot. They're in unison, moving together, mirroring each other in a lead and follow. If not, they'll be bumping into each other, stepping on each other's toes, and it'll be a big, terrible mess. We, the audience, want them to be in harmony with each other. Now let me introduce the other couples around our first two dancers. Imagine a big choreographed dance centering around our main couple. Everyone is in harmony and unison. If not, the couples will be crashing into each other and it'll be disrupting the whole scene. Now, let's switch the stage. Let's move to a big space choreography with the real stars. In my research, I'm working with a dancing couple. The first dancer is a star, the other, a telescope. These two, like our dancers, have to be in harmony in a lead and follow dance. Our star, the leader, is making very small but rapid fluctuations due to the movement of the atmosphere. This is why the star appears to twinkle, and also causes images from ground-based telescopes to appear blurry. I'm using adaptive optics and computer processing techniques within the telescope to dance with our star. First, a rapidly adjusting mirror morphs to the shape and movement of the atmosphere to apply correction. Second, my software then removes any leftover effects caused by the atmosphere. This keeps the star focused, centered, and still relative to our telescope. These techniques alone help astronomers unlock the secrets of the universe by providing clearer images. Now, let's take our two dancers, the star and telescope, and put them back into our big space choreography. Who else is dancing? Well, astronauts, the International Space Station, internet satellites, and space junk. If these other dancers crash into each other, then our astronauts will die. The International Space Station explodes, and you could lose your internet connection. My two dancers, the star and telescope, are special in this choreography. They allow us to clearly see the dance floor. Whenever another dancer passes between our star and telescope, I can clearly image and track them. This allows for agencies like NASA, SpaceX, or other governments to move their sensitive technologies from harm's way. We save our astronauts from collision. We save billions of dollars in usable technology, and you get to keep your internet. Thank you.
Before I come here to New Zealand, I was living in Egypt, and Egypt has one of the highest pollution rates in the world. And as you know, pollution is also a global issue. To visualize that problem, if you look at the slides I'm showing here, you would see on the left how much polluted our air is. And thanks to the lockdown, we were able to see how our life would look like with less pollution and less emissions. And that's the other side of the photo. So I asked myself one day, what am I going to do about this pollution problem? Because either I find a solution for it, or I just run away to another country with less pollution and just live there. And what I did is, of course I ran away. So I came to New Zealand, but before you judge me, I came to New Zealand to do my master's on finding a solution for the pollution. So what I did is I started from my last job. So I was working in a company in which we separate two chemicals. One of them is valuable because we need it in making our clothes, our carpets, some electronic parts, and pretty much everything we have. And they separate that valuable one from the another one undesired. So this separation process is considered as one of 7 processes that can change the world if an alternative was found. But why is that? Because the way it works. Imagine if we have a container, and in that container we have water and sand. Water is the valuable chemical that we want, and the sand is the undesired one. So the way they separate the water from the sand in the industry is by heating the container. So when they heat the container, the water evaporates, then they can collect it. But because this method depends on heating, they burn fossil fuel, and the amount of energy required globally for that separation equals the total amount of energy used by the whole country of New Zealand, and that's a large amount of energy. And burning fossil fuel leads to CO2 emissions, which contributes to the pollution of our atmosphere and even more problems like global warming. So my research is finding a new way to do that separation. Imagine that container with water and sand. If we don't heat it, and instead of that, if we use a sponge, we put it into the container, what is going to happen? The sponge is going to absorb the water. Then you will be able to take the sponge after being saturated with water to another empty container, then you squeeze it and you get the pure water. And because that method does not depend on heating, we will be able to save 50% of the amount of energy used for that separation globally, and will also reduce the emissions to our atmosphere, equivalent to emissions of 3 million households. So my research is gonna save us heaps of money and will also make our life looks like the photo on your right, but without a lockdown.
Well, those were three great presentations that we've just heard from the College of Engineering. Next up is the College of Education, Health and Human Development.
I'm researching gentle sleep interventions for young children. Up to 40% of young children wake in the night and resist bedtime. This is one of the most common difficulties that parents with young children face. It's so common that I'm guessing that whoever coined the term sleeping like a baby probably has never had a baby. Many children, and thus their parents, wake many, many times throughout the night. This can go on for years. Not getting enough sleep can decrease mental health and well-being for parent and child and can increase conflict in families. The good news is that we've got research-based sleep interventions which have been shown to be effective. They're variations to the dominant approach, but at its core, it requires that parents do not respond to crying or calling out in the night for periods of time while their child learns to fall asleep independently. This approach has helped many families. But consider this. Research suggests that around 50% of parents who are struggling with their child's sleep and want it to change are avoiding sleep interventions. The main reasons for this are that they are not comfortable with the requirement that they cannot comfort their child in the night, or because they worry about the amount of stress that a sleep intervention would cause for themselves and their child. Now, there are also a number of books which recommend a variety of gentle sleep intervention alternatives. Very little, if any of these, have evidence confirming that they are effective and gentle. My work as a psychologist with families tells me that neither effectiveness nor gentleness can be assumed. Thus, for my research, I've drawn on the science of behaviour change to identify techniques which can make sleep interventions minimally stressful for parent and child. I'm supporting families to implement these interventions and using sleep diaries, questionnaires, and interviews to measure whether the interventions are effective and whether they really are minimally stressful for parent and child. There are a significant number of families who want help with their child's sleep, but when they turn to professionals who recommend the evidence-based approaches, parents do not feel comfortable with implementing these techniques. There is a very real need for gentle, research-based sleep interventions. This is what I aim to achieve.
Kia ora. Aristotle once said that in all things of nature there lies something of the marvelous, and I couldn't agree more. Even as a geologist, I'm amazed that the beautiful Lake Taupo, illustrated at the top of my slide, is an active caldera volcano that formed as a result of a super eruption 27,000 years ago. Such super eruptions, though rare, can cause immense damage to the surrounding. The Taupo volcanic zone is an active center of geologic unrest in New Zealand, and therefore it's important that people understand the risks and hazards associated with such unrest so that they are better prepared in the face of a disaster. But how do we do this? This is where I aim to use digital storytelling to design resources aimed at caldera risk literacy. Stories, you see, are powerful tools because they can engage people and draw them in. Digital storytelling is also appealing because it sparks action, fosters collaboration, can address multiple learning outcomes. But most importantly, it enables a shift in agency by allowing users to tell their stories. In my research, I intend to explore 3 different digital tools for this purpose. The first digital tool is a co-constructed bicultural virtual field trip that provides 2 different worldviews of looking at geologic unrest. By interviewing The Maori leaders, the geologists, and the educators who developed this tool are aimed to identify the design principles within this resource that are scalable. The second digital tool is a Choose Your Own Digital Volcano Adventure module that can allow secondary school students to share their perceptions of unrest. By exploring these student-generated artifacts, we can design resources that not only acknowledge their perceptions, their stories, but can also ensure action-oriented competence. The third digital tool is an educational game called Magma Pop, directed at undergraduate geology students, through which the link between activity beneath Lake Taupo, or a supervolcano, and its physical manifestations such as ground motion or unrest can be communicated. By exploring these three different digital ecologies, I aim to identify the features of effective caldera risk literacy resources. Because stories and voices outlive people and outlive all the lands in which they are created, and therefore their power is immense. Thank you.
Well, that was definitely educational. Now we have the College of Arts with Whale and Seed.
Imagine there's something that you really desire, but pursuing it could lead to significant negative consequences, such as outraging your family, or even worse, acquiring a bad reputation and then losing your job, or losing your friends, or getting in trouble with the law, or ultimately incurring the wrath of God in this life and the next. What would you do? Would you still pursue your desires, or would you repress yourself? Despite the enormous pressure to conform to religious and social norms, many Egyptians behave and express themselves in ways that seem to deviate from these norms, while at the same time managing and mitigating some, if not most, of the negative consequences. So how do they do that, and what enables them to do so? When we look at the literature, there is a significant focus on Islamic piety. Piety, or taqwa in Arabic, describes the virtue of being devoted to God and obeying His commands at all times. We now understand that piety is not simply an abstract religious virtue, and that it is a dynamic way of living that corresponds to social and historical developments. However, impiety, which describes any act of disobedience to God, is hardly ever studied, which is interesting given how widespread impiety is in Egyptian society. In my research, I attempt to unravel the complexity of impiety through an ethnographic examination of marginalized groups that are typically considered to be impious, such as metal music fans, homosexuals, and atheists. A wide range of participants from these groups will be recruited for extensive interviews, which I will analyze to understand their everyday life and how they manage the stigma associated with their lifestyle and their identities. I am yet to conduct these interviews, but an example of a possible scenario would be this: a Muslim man or a Muslim woman who consume alcohol would still strongly refrain from consuming pork or engaging in non-marital sexual relationships. So how do we understand that, even though all of those three things are Islamically prohibited? It is therefore possible, and this is my hypothesis, that even for individuals who practice impious behavior, there is still a chance to compromise and commit to piety through these compromises. What we need to understand is the logic, the rationale, and the context, and perhaps also the politics of such compromises. The importance of this research is threefold. First, it examines marginalized groups that are understudied, whether in Egypt or in Muslim-majority societies. Second, it contributes to the academic effort to represent and understand the complexity of Muslim identities. Third, it helps us understand Islamic behavior and practices as social phenomena that are not simply bound to tradition, and a tradition that is frozen in time.
Suppose if I say that I'm in this room at the same time and I'm not in this room, then you might think that I'm trying to be a bit poetic, or I'm a lunatic, and you'd stop listening to me. Because I'm contradicting myself. The rejection of contradiction is the bedrock of human concept of rationality. And this concept is not new. Greek philosopher Aristotle, who lived 4th century before Common Era, said that a sentence can be true or false, but cannot be both together at the same time. This principle became the cardinal principle of modern science and philosophy. However, over recently, some of the Australasian philosophers have claimed that contradictions sometimes can be true. In one of their arguments, they have referred to Buddha's dialogue. Buddha lived in India 6th century BC before Common Era, debated with many people. Some of the debate have a very interesting structure. Unlike Aristotle, who have only considered the true and false, these debate have considered true, false, both, and neither. Here is an example. Suppose if you ask me, is present King of France bold, like someone who doesn't have any here? I would say no, because it is not only false, but also you are presupposing the existence of present King of France. Then if you ask me, is present King of France not bold? I will say no, for same reason. If you think basically he might have lost some of his hair, then if you ask me, is present King of France bold and not bold at the same time? I would say no again. If you ask, is present King of France neither bold nor not bold? I would say again no, because all those questions presupposing the existence of present King of France. This form of debate is known as Chatushkoti. After the death of Buddha, it became a philosophical method. By the time of Aristotle, it had reached to Greece. Few centuries later, it has traveled to China and Japan. You might think that this is nothing but an Eastern form of mysticism, and this is an irrational system. Many Orientalists have thought so over the last 200 years. But in my research, I'm investigating, is it really an irrational system? Is it really endorsing contradiction? Or how to make sense of rejection of all four alternatives? And I'm doing it by becoming an armchair Sherlock Holmes, reading 2000 years old plum leaf manuscripts written in many dead languages. And I think my research will throw a new light in our understanding of rationality. Thank you.
Awesome work from the College of Arts. Finally, my college, College of Business and Law, with Sunita and Simone.
Kia ora, my name is Sunita Gautam. Everyone has a story, and here is mine. My granddad used to live in a small village in India. Later on, he moved to a town where my dad grew up, and then Dad moved to a bigger city. Following their footsteps, I made the biggest move and migrated all the way to New Zealand. We often share our stories and share our experiences about settling into these new places. What I learned that our experiences represents different realities. Further, I have spoken to many of my colleagues and friends who have migrated from different countries to New Zealand. And the finding is that these realities are still on a different spectrums. To know more about these realities, I explored literature and learned that there are various concepts forming various theories which represents realities. But the question is that does these concepts represent the realities of current immigrants? My research is focused on immigrant entrepreneurs in New Zealand. New Zealand, an immigrant-friendly country. The significance of this research is huge for government agencies and employers. After 4 years, 7 months, 20 days, and 35 interviews, I have some answers. The relevance of these concepts are huge. Some concepts have changed their form. Some concepts have completely lost their relevance, whereas some concepts are on the go. There are many new concepts identified during the research analysis as well. What I learned in a nutshell is that these concepts are evolving with time, with the political situation, the external influences as well. So to know the current reality of immigrant entrepreneurs, my research has generated a framework. This framework is capable to measure the current realities of the entrepreneurs. Why do we need to know these realities? These realities will help departments like immigration to support the new coming migrants. One of the findings of my research is that there is more likely that skilled Indian migrant would venture into an entrepreneurship. This finding could be helpful for immigration department to support the new migrants or encourage entrepreneurship as a form of migration for new Indian migrants. Therefore, the framework has got not only significance in New Zealand or Indian population, but has got potential to go and be tested worldwide. Thank you.
My thesis discusses cartel criminalization in New Zealand. What are cartels? Cartels are where competitors work together to increase their prices. Currently, there are civil sanctions for cartel conduct in the Commerce Act. The penalties can lead up to 500,000 for individuals and up to 10 million New Zealand dollars for body corporates. But from next April onwards, criminal sanctions are possible with imprisonment of a maximum of 7 years. Now you're probably wondering how I got interested in that topic. It was less my urgent need to follow up on cartels and the prosecution of them, but more the government's undecided approach to the question whether to criminalize or not. The process started in 2008 with a national-led government that wanted to introduce criminal sanctions for cartel conduct. These sanctions were later removed after much consideration and discussion with the stakeholders. The stakeholders said, for example, that in a small market like New Zealand, there are often valid pro-competitive reasons for competitors to work together. 10 years after the discussion started, the new Labour-led government introduced a bill that reintroduced the criminal sanctions, and that got passed with a narrow majority last year. My research not only focuses on the road to cartel criminalization in legal terms, but also on the bigger picture. Are cartels always bad? Let's talk about toilet paper in the current pandemic. In order to avoid the panic buying, supermarkets could agree to cooperate with their competitors in two ways. One, they could agree to limit the purchase so that to make sure that everyone gets some, which would be considered as restricting output. Or they could increase the price of one toilet paper roll to $5 in order to stop the stockpiling, which could be considered as price fixing. Both case scenarios are considered as cartel conduct under the Commerce Act and would lead to penalties. Well, in the first case, it is unlikely that it will be sanctioned because the Commerce Commission, the regulator for cartel conduct in New Zealand, has made clear that under the current circumstances, it is more important to make sure that essential goods and services are provided for New Zealanders. However, the second case is likely to be seen as rampant profiteering. Conduct like that would next year send managers right to jail.
Well, those were some amazing presentations from the students, and I'm really glad that I'm not a judge because it is a very difficult decision that needs to be made. We do, however, have 3 judges that will have made the decisions and viewed the videos of your 3MT presentations. They are Joe Noble-Nesbitt, who is the Academic Quality Team Leader at the University of Canterbury.
Art Martinson, who is the Manager of Digital Technologies and Data Solutions at the Christchurch Airport.
And Professor Alessandro Palermo, who is in Civil Engineering.
We'd like to say a big thanks to all 3 of our judges for taking the time to view these incredible videos and for ranking and coming up with our winners for this evening.
For the first time this year, we also have the Visualise My Thesis competition. Visualise My Thesis is a new initiative that's been put together by some of the staff at the library. Big shout out to Fiona Tyson, who's been running this, putting a lot of hard mahi in the background. But it's a way of trying to communicate your thesis in a visual format and only 1 minute. So if 3 minutes is hard with a presentation, 1 minute on video is even harder. I was fortunate enough to be one of the judges this year and all the submissions were amazing. But we do have some winners and I'm going to hand it over to Fiona to talk a little bit more about the process and who those winners are.
Visualise Your Thesis is an international competition in which research students create an audio-visual presentation that explains their research project in 60 seconds. Using a pre-supplied PowerPoint template, contestants bring together narrative, images and sound to share what they are researching and why. In doing so, they must draw upon, or quickly develop, an understanding of copyright, technical skills, and the ability to succinctly communicate and promote their research. This is the first year we have run a local Visualise Your Thesis competition at UC, and we were thrilled to have 19 amazing entries. These contestants are vying for the following prize pool: $1,000 for first, $500 for second prize, and $250 for third. First prize also gains automatic entry into the international competition, which offers Australian $5,000 for first prize, $2,000 for second prize, and $1,000 for third prize. Our wonderful judging panel, UC academics Erin Harrington, Ekant Veer and Kim Rutter, had the unenviable task of deciding upon our winners. First, they narrowed the field down to the top 5 entries, which we share with you now.
Every day we have to make small decisions which may not seem significant, but they are the ones which are changing us and our world. If you want to use wood outside, you will end up buying timber treated with CCA, substance so toxic that is restricted and banned in many countries around the world. We are here to give you eco-friendly alternative, naturally durable and CCA-free eucalyptus timber. I modeled tree taper to describe the shape of the tree and tree volume to get the quantity of durable wood inside the tree. With my tool, you will be able to predict how much wood will come from the forest and what products can be made. Our research team will create an alternative in timber world for you, because we believe you deserve to have the right to choose. Eco-friendly eucalyptus, your small choice towards the big change.
Are you tired of going 30 through roadworks? Our water supply pipes are leaking. They're blocked. We don't know exactly where the problem is, so we just dig up the whole thing. Roads look like this all the time. There must be an easier way. Introducing pressure waves. Just generate a pressure wave inside the pipe. It travels through the water, bouncing off whatever's in the way. All you have to do is measure what goes in and what comes back. Easy. Right now, researchers are using experiments, physics, and computer models to understand and predict how the pressure wave reflection is affected by the fault type, the fault size, and the fault location. So we can have smart, real-time pipe diagnostics without excavation. All this so you can drive smoother.
Kia ora koutou. My name's Kim Rutter, and it's been my privilege to be part of the judging panel for Visualise Your Thesis UC. This is the first socially distanced virtual prize giving I've been involved in, but that's the kind of first that 2020 is all about. So the first thing I'd like to say is well done to everyone who entered. There was an amazing range of research on show, from the effects of light on kelp forests to monitoring driver inattention, from ethylene purification to cultural representations of motherhood. But regardless of the subject, imagine distilling your PhD into 60 seconds. Think about capturing the essence of all that work and passion in 1 minute of pictures and a soundbite. What a challenge. And don't forget that we judges came from a range of backgrounds, engineering and commerce and arts, so there was always someone who needed things explained in words of one syllable. And that was the challenge, summing your work up in a way that anyone can understand. How did we practically judge the entries? Well, of 19 entries, 12 qualified for final judging. We independently reviewed each of the 12 videos, assigning scores for content, sound, visuals, and impact. And then we got together with our top 5 rankings and we got talking. Even narrowing things down to a top 5 was very hard, but interestingly, although our order changed, we all had pretty much the same names in the top 5 lists. So then we sat down and defended our rankings. And it was what you might call a robust discussion. Some swoops, some passionate defence, some sudden changes of direction. And by the end, we were very clear on our first, second and third places. But before I get to that, some special mentions. There was a video where it appeared the entire department was involved as extras. There were entries where candidates created their own original images and even made their own custom animations. There was one entry where the candidate composed their own score. The overall level of design and layout was really professional, but at the end of it, we were simply looking for the clearest expression of the what of it, the how of it, and the why of it. What are you doing? How are you doing? And why is it going to make a difference? And with that, the prize winners. Third prize goes to Marika Barbuda for Living Through the Haze, Effects of Sedimentation on Seaweed Forests. Second prize goes to Daniel Buchniawicz for modelling STEM properties for eucalyptus in New Zealand's dryland environments. And first prize goes to Jane Alexander for pipe diagnostics. Just add pressure waves.
Congratulations to all of our winners. I'll be in contact with how you can claim your prize givings and your giant check. And now, back to 3MT.
And now to our 3MT winners. Deciding on the presentations was very difficult. I sat in as an observer on the judges' deliberations and saw the care that was taken in selecting our winners. As you will no doubt agree, the standard of these presentations was particularly high, and while not usually the case, the judges have selected their 3 winners, but also asked that we announce 2 additional students as highly commended. They are Amanda Board from the School of Biological Sciences in the College of Science, and Shripana Saha from the School of Teacher Education and Earth and Environment in the College of Education, Health and Human Development.
So, in reverse order, in third place is
Morgan Tracy, PhD student from the School of Biological Sciences, College of Science.
In second place, we have
Samuel Martin Trissino, PhD student from the Department of Chemical and Process Engineering in the College of Engineering. And the winner, the first place getter for 3MT 2020 is Flynn Adcock, Master's student in the School of Biological Science, College of Science. Congratulations to our 3 winners this evening and everybody who was in the final. It's a huge achievement to make it to the final of 3MT at the University of Canterbury. It was incredible to see the range of research, the breadth and depth of research that's going on here. It's high quality research and it was amazing.
It was so difficult to judge for our judges, so thank you so much for taking part. Like I said at the start, this is not how we want to do this. We really love having you all together to celebrate, and we will do that towards the end of the year. So keep your eyes out for that. We will see you in person. We will have that celebration. Any final words from you, George?
From me, I'd just like to say a big congratulations to everyone that even gave it a punt. It's pretty hard to describe your research in 3 minutes, and this year having to make a video is something that we haven't had to do. So yeah, just a really big pat on the back for everyone that's given it a go.
Yeah, so well done to everyone. Ka kite anō e hōma. Thanks for taking part. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.